Hi, in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about the conceptual shifts that you'll find in the next generation science standards. But before we do that, let's hop in the Wayback Machine. Let's go way back when people had problems like this and this. Back when we were anxiously awaiting the very first camera that could take digital pictures that were both moving and still. It had a whopping 0.3 megapixels and only cost $2,000. At the same time, we were looking forward to the very first MP3 player. It didn't skip, and it held 6 of your favorite songs. That same year, we started to use the word soccer mom, and we also started to use the word dot and .com instead of just something at the end of a sentence. That year, of course, was the year that the National Science Education Standards were released. This was a pretty big event at the time, and it really synthesized what we knew about teaching science and our vision for what science should look like in the classroom. It had a strong commitment to inquiry and really paved the way for serious reform and research efforts over the next 15 years. Now, of course, we have new science standards. So let's take a look at what's changed since the first version was released. Of course, we also learned a lot since then about how students learn, not just in science, but in all disciplines. There's quite a few major reports from the National Research Council, plus thousands of journal articles, research articles were published focused on science education. Over 2,500 articles just in the top 3 science ed journals alone. So what we learned from these really kind of fed into the development of the framework for K-12 science education and the next generation science standards. It caused us to look at standards in a different way, and the writers made a series of 6 conceptual shifts. When I look at the conceptual shifts, I kind of like to package them a little bit differently. So I'll take the 6 and cluster them into 3 different groups. So the first group is Shift 1 and Shift 5. So Shift 1 is that science should reflect how that the standards should reflect how science and engineering are done in the real world. So an integration of disciplinary core ideas, practices, so the types of things that scientists do, and also those cross-cutting concepts that cut across the different disciplines of science. And then Shift 5 is that we need to integrate science, technology, and engineering, so all 3 of those into our science instruction. There's quite a few reasons why these shifts are important. In the NRC's study called America's Lab Report, they synthesized a lot of research about the efficacy of science laboratory activities, and what they found really was that when experiences are integrated, so when we integrate the use of practices into learning content, student content understanding increases, and they're also more likely to be able to transfer that to different situations. And also, as you look at how students that would be considered from non-dominant populations, so diverse populations, and those that are traditionally underrepresented in science, we also know that context is important. It's helpful for them if they're actively engaged, if the content that they're learning is relevant to their local community and to their culture. We also know that for English language learners, focusing on hands-on activities and helping them use language in context really helps them develop language. From a neuroscience standpoint, we also know the following. We've also learned the following: that experiential learning that stimulates multiple senses in students, such as hands-on science activities, is not only the most engaging, but also the most likely to be stored as long-term memories. The best remembered information is learned through multiple and varied exposures. followed by authentic use of knowledge. So these two shifts really capitalize on that research. It also allows us to think about these standards in terms of how will these shifts impact student learning in our classrooms. Shift 3 and Shift 4 can also be clustered together. So Shift 3 really focuses on the idea that standards and the content that we teach through K-12 should build coherently. So we should have a smaller number of ideas that build and come back to each other in early elementary, upper elementary, middle school, and high school. So each time getting a little bit more complex. Shift 4 similarly also focuses on using or having a smaller number of core ideas and building a deeper understanding of those ideas, and also making sure that students are using those in a variety of ways. There's quite a bit of research that shows why these shifts are important. First, one of the largest criticisms of science education in the United States is that we just try and do way too much. We have really thick textbooks. We try and race through all of those, all of the pages in those textbooks, and we focus on many more kind of discrete topics than what's done in many other countries where their student achievement scores are higher. One interesting study that came out a while ago was by Phil Sadler and his colleagues, and what he found is that when students really at the high school level really dig into content, so if they dig in deep and focus for at least 1 month on a topic, they're much more successful in introductory college science courses. Wiggins and McTighe also point to a lot of research that shows that this deeper understanding is important. So they say research on expertise suggests that superficial coverage of many topics in a domain, so science, is a poor way to help students develop the competencies that will prepare them for future learning and work. Curricula that emphasizes breadth of knowledge may prevent effective organization of knowledge because not enough time is provided to learn anything in depth. Curricula that are a mile wide and an inch deep risk developing disconnected rather than connected knowledge. Now, if you think about what we often hear people say, so we start at the college level, and quite often you'll hear instructors at the college level blame high school teachers or be frustrated because students aren't learning anything in high school. And then you go to high school, and high school teachers are frustrated because students aren't learning anything in middle school. And then of course you go to middle school, and they're worried because students aren't learning science in elementary school. And of course in elementary school, they're worried because students aren't coming into school with the experiences they need. So all along the way, we get frustrated that students haven't learned the things that we want them to learn. How often do we have to teach the metric system before it sticks in? How often do we have to teach students how to use a ruler, to use a microscope, those types of things? And I think if you look at what this research shows, it shows that if what we're expecting of students is disconnected, and they start viewing these things as individual pieces and not as a coherent picture of what science is, they're not going to remember it, and we are going to have to keep reteaching things before we can go on to the next thing that they're going to forget when our class is done. Wiggins and McTighe continue, experts, so expert learners, first seek to develop an understanding of problems or challenge, and this often involves thinking in terms of core concepts or big ideas, things like schemas, themes, models, theories, etc. Novices' knowledge is much less likely to be organized around big ideas. Novices are more likely to approach problems by searching for correct formulas and pat answers that fit their everyday intuitions. So again, we can see how a coherent structure within our curriculum, K-12, building on a small number of core ideas and developing those over time, and really focusing on those smaller sets of ideas deeply and helping students use them has the ability to make a profound difference on student learning. And I think as we look at these two shifts, we can look at the standards through this question. So how will this shift impact student learning in your district as a whole? Finally, the last two the shifts that you'll see. So the first one, shift 1, is that the standards are written as performance expectations. So they look very different than many standards documents that we're used to seeing. So as a performance expectation, they're really a strong guideline for the assessment of learning. So after our instruction, what should students be able to know and be able to do? The other shift that is really exciting in these standards is the 6th shift. So the standards are correlated to the Common Core State standards for mathematics and English language arts. This will really help us as educators as we try to build connections between content area literacy, which is critically important for student success in science, not just K-12, but also as they move into the workforce or on to college. And then obviously building strong connections to math. So what math is appropriate at different grade levels and with different science content, and how can we help as science teachers to reinforce our students' mathematical abilities. So I think as you think about assessment, we also need to think about the way that this is going to change assessment, especially change assessment in our classroom. So really with these performance expectations, we're going to be focused much more on using different types of measures and really an increased emphasis on the use of performance assessments. So Wiggins and McTighe state, many assessments measure only recently taught knowledge and never ask for authentic performance. So that would be conditional knowledge and skill in context. Whether students know when, where, why to use what they have learned in the past. This approach leads to surprisingly poor test results because students do not recognize prior learning in unfamiliar looking test questions, especially when the test has no context clues and hints, as occurs when teachers immediately quiz students on recent materials. So again, by looking at standards as performance expectations, we're able to assess our students much more authentically and really use these performance expectations as guidance to develop assessments that measure what students are able to do with their knowledge. So as we think about the performance expectations and articulating standards to Common Core, we can always look at the standards through this question. So how will these shifts impact your instructional planning? All right, so as we think about the next generation science standards, as we continue to explore them, I think we can really take a look at and reflect on how these standards can impact student learning, how they'll impact our district curriculum, and what curricular choices do we need to make, and then also how are we going to be using these standards in instructional planning.